right. So we talking about relationships still, and now we want to get into tying it to how relationships and interpersonal relationships affect our mental health. So the first thing that comes to mind for me in working with couples myself is that often we are dealing with two individuals who have different communication styles and different conflict management styles. So in y'all relationships or relationships you've been in, or even family dynamics, like with your parents, siblings, do you see different communication styles or conflict management styles being an issue?
Yeah. So when it comes to communication styles, we talked a little bit earlier about submissiveness. That's a different communication style too. I know it's about being submissive and everything, but that's like maybe submission is a part of a love language. Because like when we were talking about love language, I think like acts of service is a little bit of submission too. And so, like, if you look in like other cultures, you'll see people like, they rubbing feet and they're doing every single thing for the man, and then like those are acts of service. And so,
Mm-hmm.
for me, that looks like submission. But like we said, when you submitting to somebody who is not going to submit back to you, or who ain't reciprocating that kind of love, or who doesn't do anything that some people feel is worth submitting to,
Mm-hmm.
that's when the problem comes in for me. So if I'm a woman, right? And say like we get into gender roles. If I'm a woman, I'm bringing home the money, I'm taking care of the kids, I'm doing most things without you. I'm cooking, I'm cleaning, I'm basically taking care of a whole household by myself, then I might not feel like I need to have somebody to submit to. Cuz why would I if I'm doing everything that the man does and more? Because if a man goes to work full day and a woman goes to work full day and a woman is still required to be submissive or do acts of service, then I mean, some people feel like they can do it by themselves.
I actually
And
agree with that take. You can.
yeah, and I'm thinking more of like communication in terms of like verbal communication. There's
Mm-hmm.
differences there too.
Different
Even with my
styles.
parents, right? My mom communicates by speaking very loudly, um, and using colorful language. And my dad communicates by just like 2 or 3 word sentences. And that's just how, but in that relationship, like in that dynamic, it causes issues because that's how he naturally communicates with anybody, even with his friends. But
Mm-hmm.
to her, when she's like expressing certain things, she's seeing that as like, you're not engaged in the conversation. You don't care. You're not listening to me. I'm not heard. This is pissing me off. And he just
Mm-hmm.
like, well, I'm just really, and it's vice versa. He's like, you're nagging. You're doing all this. And she's just really trying to talk to him. So the communication is just different. And it's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
that in my relationship a little bit too.
Yeah, and the way to work with that from a mental health perspective is, one, you have to get people to understand that you do not have to communicate the same. There are several healthy ways to communicate. What we want to avoid are those maladaptive communication styles, the ones that just you shouldn't be doing anyway. And some people do fall into those areas. So when we talk about maladaptive communication, this can lead to all sorts of mental health issues. Like, it can lead to you feeling depressed. It can lead to you feeling unheard and cause your anxiety to go up. So we want to show people, and couples in particular, when they come into therapy, give them a template of what healthy communication looks like. And what it
Mm-hmm.
looks like is understanding that, yes, we are different in the way we communicate, and that's okay, but I need to meet you halfway so that we can understand each other better. So that's given
One
all
of one
different.
of the best ways to effectively communicate is active listening. So it's funny, when we were joking earlier when we talked about active listening, but active listening is a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
So it's important to listen to understand and not to respond. You see some people when they're listening and they're waiting and they're waiting and they can't wait to just jump in there and they can't wait to talk.
Mm-hmm.
But when you listen and understand, you might listen, try to see the person's point of view, think about it, and then does it make sense? What is it? What does this feel like to me? Take a deep breath and then say, so are you saying this? ask them what they're saying. Because when you ask somebody what they're saying, and you can say, it sounds like you're saying you want me to do A, B, C, and D. And they might be like, no, that's not what I'm saying. And then you can say, well, then tell me what you're saying. That's how you listen to understand. When you listen to respond, it can look like somebody's talking, and you can't wait to just get your stuff in there. But this, but this. When you say but, you negate everything before that. Before everything that they were saying, you negate all of it. So listening to respond is never good in a relationship because you're going to run the other person in the opposite direction when they don't feel heard.
Yeah, and then even the way that you broke that down, right? It's a lot of work too. And when you're talking about like the active listening too, there's also a level of like communication in terms of like body language, right? Being reactive versus being responsive. So if you are active listening, you are being responsive. You're processing what that person's saying. You're trying to see their perspective, their point of view, and then you're responding, you know, with your feelings or asking like how they're communicating with you. But then when it comes to the reactive listening, it's just you're hearing what they're saying and you're just like reacting. There is no processing, there is no thinking about it, seeing their perspective, you're just reacting. And we often get into that cycle of just reacting. And then later on you're like, well, I told you this, and this. No, you told them that when you were reacting and they were reacting back, so they didn't hear you. And so that's where it gets real tough.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. And active listening is always the first. If you look up any communication skills like paperwork, homework, worksheets, active listening is always listed first because you have to listen first. But from there, then we get into reflective listening. That's how people know that you did hear them, when you reflect back to them what they said. I know that's a skill we use in counseling, but in actual communication, that's a necessary skill to be able to say, okay, this is what, like Auntie Shook said, this is what I heard you say. Reflect back what that person said so they can know that you are, one, listening and that you're interested in the conversation. And then the other part of it that I tell people all the time is you will not get this right 100% of the time. No therapist should ever tell you once you learn these tips and tools that you will be able to get it right 100% of the time, because you won't. We get in situations where we are reactive, where we are very upset. When you're dealing with somebody on an intimate level, it can get heated real fast and your emotions are involved. So you won't get it perfect, but just be conscious of that. Be self-aware that, okay, I didn't get that perfect. And also pay attention to if you feel flooded. Flooding is when you cannot regulate your emotions. You are getting so overwhelmed and so upset or so anxious or so depressed that you can't really verbalize what you want to say. And when you get to that point, it is okay to take a break. It's okay to say, you know what, can we finish this conversation later tonight or even tomorrow?
Yeah, but sometimes you get those people who they don't want to finish the conversation. They want to keep coming at you. They want to be yelling. They want to scream. You get violent people. You get people who, and not only men, you get violent women. You know, people, you're going to listen to me. You're going to listen to me. And then like, it's difficult then because there ain't nobody regulating their emotions. And then that's when the situation sometimes gets bad.
Yeah. And that's a clear indicator and sign that you might really need help in that relationship, because that means that person doesn't even respect your boundaries. If you tell someone, I am feeling overwhelmed and I can't have this conversation right now, I really need a break, and they just keep coming at you, they don't respect your boundaries. They don't care that you're feeling overwhelmed. So then you have to consider some choices that you are making in that relationship and being with that person.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then like thinking about like communication, love languages, like all the stuff that we talked about already, like that's a lot, right? So that shows that relationships are work. When you're dealing with another person, it's a lot of work. Then you pile on top of the relationship, you pile work, you pile kids, you know, house stuff, car stuff, friends, family, like all of that is a lot for one person to deal with. So at what point do you just say like, this is just too much for me? And what do you do? How do you manage that?
When is enough
It
enough?
sounds like you're talking to a point where it says, when is it enough? When am I tired? So for me, and this is for me, enough is when your mental health is fading. If I can't love you and love me at the same time, if loving you makes me disrespect myself, that means it's too much. And that means it's enough. And that could look any kind of way for me. For me, if you're hitting me, I don't love myself if I let somebody hit me. That's enough. I can't love myself and love you. If you are not holding up your end of the bargain, financially or whatever it looks like, emotionally. If you want to be out all the time and you don't want to do home, but I'm doing home and I'm doing home by myself. If I feel like I can do it by myself, maybe I can. And so if, you know what I mean? So a lot of times we don't realize that people are a want and need, but a lot of times we can supplement our needs, or we can supplement our wants for our needs. So that's sometimes when it looks like enough too.
But yeah, I agree with that. And I like how you put it where like you can supplement your wants for your needs too. Like, yes, you may feel like you absolutely need this person in your life, but if this person is contributing to your mental health in ways that you don't like if you get anxious when you think about confronting this person or talking to this person, have a conversation with this person about things that are not going well, that's too much for you. I mean, you should feel secure. You should feel safe. You should not feel like super anxious and nervous and sweating and feeling like that. Just real tense when it's time to have a conversation with this person about something. Like that's a point where it's like, okay, this is enough. This is too much. I need to pull back. Like, I need to take care of me.
Or do they add to you? Because some people will take away. If you're taking away too much, you don't want an energy sucker. If they're sucking away all your energy, if just talking to them, like Amber says, just talking to them is becoming too much. If just being with them is becoming a lot on you, and you can't emotionally regulate. Y'all are fighting each other. Y'all are, going at each other. And fighting is not only physical, because it's not that you fight. Most people have arguments and disagreements. It's how you fight. And so if you're attacking one another, if you're going at another, if you're being malicious, if you are downing one another, if you are bringing each other down and y'all can't grow together, that's when enough is enough.
Mm-hmm. I like that you brought that up, Shug, because that brought me right back to something that I always use in couples work. When we start talking about conflict management, I go straight to my John Gottman work. John Gottman is a renowned couples therapist. And
we had him at a marriage retreat one time.
Oh my God, you met him?
Yeah, we were doing some kind of something for the military. It was pretty dope.
Dang.
It's Laugh Your Way to a Better Marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Laugh Your Way to, that's his book. That's one of his books. Laugh Your Way to a Better Marriage. Yeah, I got his other book over here, but I always use Gottman. He actually has a certification training for therapists who want to work with couples. And what you just described, Shug, was what he calls the Four Horsemen. So when it comes to conflict, there are four horsemen that you want to absolutely avoid. And yes, they might show up, but they really shouldn't be. And that's criticism, defensiveness, contempt, and stonewalling. So we've all probably done these at one point or another. But once
I did all that in the last 24 hours. But go ahead.
And we do that's why I consistently tell the couples I work with, you will not get this perfect 100% of the time. You're looking for a good 70 to 80% balance, because sometimes we're human. We're gonna mess up. We're gonna forget or be too angry, and that's okay. But the main one that he says determines for him if a couple is going to stay together is the contempt, because contempt means you have no respect and regard for me. If you feel contempt for me, that can determine if we are going to last in a relationship. So when I see that in couples, in my own mind, I'm saying to myself, enough is enough. They're not going to make it over this hump because they feel contempt for one another. And that's hard to get through. You can fix criticism. You can fix defensiveness. We can fix stonewalling, but contempt is a little bit harder.
Mm-hmm. Contempt sounds like Yeah, go ahead, Amber.
No, I was just going to say earlier, I was thinking, before you said that, that when you look at that person and you just don't like them anymore, you don't like that person. If they were not your husband or your sister, brother, whatever, they wouldn't be in your life, that's when it's enough too. I don't like you anymore. Yeah. That's contempt.
Yes. That's contempt.
When you feel that, that's enough. Enough is enough at that point.
Yep. That is one of my...
And when you stay, When you stay, but you've already mentally left, that's when it starts to get dangerous too, because then you're doing harm and you're not growing with that person and you're not helping that person grow. And so you might as well just go. And it's okay to cut your losses. I think that some people have a hard time cutting their losses. You know, there might be kids involved, or there might be finances involved. You might have brought a house together. But for me, if it's not a marriage and it's not something that's salvageable, then I would say it needs to be gone. Now, marriage is not something that you just up and throw away, because, you know, everything can be worked on. And honestly, sometimes you're going to see a lot of this. There's going to be a problem with somebody because we're human. But how big are the problems? Can you continue to handle those problems and still like that person? And like contempt is like resentment. When I start to resent you and I just don't like you, period, what are we doing?
It's probably over. Yeah. Two questions you should ask yourself. If this is what I tell couples, if you are trying to figure out, am I at that point? Is enough enough? It goes with what Auntie Amber said. I always ask couples, if you were not with this person, would they be your friend? Is this your friend? Could you see this person being your friend? Because if you can't see them being your friend right now, then they probably are not. You don't feel like they're a friend, and that relationship is at a breaking point. And then the other question I always use is, if your best friend came to you and described her situation exactly like yours, she was in the exact same situation and her partner was exactly like your partner, what would you tell her? What would you say to her, or what would you say to him? Because what we would tell others, we could easily look at other people's situation and say, enough is enough there. But when it comes to ourselves, we can't turn that mirror and say, oh, well, dang, my situation looks like this and enough is enough here. It's hard for us to do that because the emotional connection is different.
Yeah, and that also speaks to how important it is to have therapy as well, because when you can't, it's hard to look at yourself in your own situation and say what needs to change or actually do the things that need to change. But you have someone that looks from the outside in and they're like, oh, okay, this is what I'm seeing. Oh, you seeing that too? Okay, well, maybe, yeah, that is something that needs to change. But also another thing to add on to that as well is emotions, right? When it gets to the point, I think Suge and I were talking about this personally earlier. When it gets to the point where you have cried and you have like sat alone, like you have went through this full episode of depression, and then it shifts to anger or it shifts to some other emotion, that is when you're like, it shouldn't even go that far. But when it gets there, that's when you're like, okay, for real, I need to walk away from this, because this is going to be detrimental to me and the other person. When you're angry, ain't no reasoning. Like when you're to that point, there's no reasoning. There's no like, let me stop myself. Let me not say these things to this person to break them down. You're going to attack that person and yourself. So that's another indicator that like maybe it's just enough is enough at that point too.
Anger.
It's also okay to take a break. That's a big thing right there, is taking a break too, because a lot of people are not healthy. And trauma bonding, what trauma bonding is you and a person bonding over the same kind of trauma that you have, and people who trauma bond try to heal each other. And maybe in some cases you get in with somebody, you can heal them or they can heal you, but you should be a whole person before you get into any kind of relationship, because when you're a whole person and you meet a whole person, it can be beautiful, because you're not trying to bring somebody up, pull somebody up by their bootstraps, but you guys are meeting at a happy medium. You're meeting in the middle. And so it's okay if you need to take a break and you need to get yourself together and let them get themselves together and then come back when you guys are both whole.
I love that. You said that in adult language, and I love it, because I tell my teens that, but I tell them this in terms of like, it's kind of to avoid codependency, right? Because, you know, teenagers depend a lot on their friends and their boyfriend, and like what my boyfriend he's the only person that'll ever love me, you know, like that's how teens think. So I always tell them, like, you don't want this person to be half of you. You want them to be an addition, a supplement to you. You want to be your whole self. You want to form your identity fully, and then this person is just extra, like they add on to it and they make it better. So that I love how you put it. But when I explain it, it's always in those teenage terms so they can understand it a little bit better.
I love that. I think it's very idealistic. Idealistically, that is the perfect scenario. Come to a situation already whole, so nobody is making you feel like they're fulfilling you or you need them in that respect. But we know that that's not how it looks in reality a lot of times. And I don't want people to hear that and then think, oh, I'm still healing and growing. So does that mean I don't deserve love or I don't deserve somebody? Because that's how that sometimes comes off when you say, do your work. You got to do your work on you. You got to be whole before you try to be with anybody. And it's like, so I need to be alone until I'm whole. I mean, some would say, yes, get yourself together first. But realistically, we need intimate relationships. We need connection. That helps in healing. At the end of the day, our bonds with people, we were not made and put on this world to live it alone. So we need those interpersonal relationships and those bonds with people. And it doesn't just mean romantic relationships. You need friendships. You need, if you're a woman, you need sisters. You need sister friends that'll be there for you. If you're a guy, you need those guys, not just to talk about football with, but to talk about real life things. You need that connection with people.
The point is that they are helping you heal. They're not healing you. And so they are supplements. They're additional people in your life that are helping you to heal, but it's ultimately on you to heal yourself. That means that you look where you need to look to find that healing. So if your husband or wife or partner can help support you in that healing, absolutely, they help you with that, but they're not doing it for you. And a lot of people get in that state where they're allowing someone to do it for them. And so then it's like this broken person, you bring this person in, they're healing you. So now they're a part of you. And when it's time for them to leave, you're completely broken again. How about they just help you? They provide that support. You find coping skills as well that feeds into that healing. You find these different things that feeds into that healing, but it's not solely dependent on this person.
Yeah, because you get some people, you might have a serial cheater and they don't need to go and get in another relationship until they've worked on why they can't attach to somebody in a relationship. You might have a woman who's, and not that cheaters are only men or women, because all this stuff is interchangeable. But you might have somebody who likes to hit a man. I've known people who the man was being abused, and you might have a woman who wants to abuse the man, or a man who wants to abuse a woman. You don't get with them because you need relationships. You fix that part of you first so that you're not breaking somebody instead of being an addition in their life.
Yeah, I agree with that.
So the takeaway is
people to feel like, I didn't want people to hear that and feel like, okay, because I have so much work to do on myself, I'm not deserving of relationship.
No, absolutely. Now. Yeah. No, it was good to provide that. But it was good to provide that clarification though, so that we could make sure that people understand that's not what we're saying. We're not saying that at all. Yeah.
It's good. And plus you can't be a nickel out there looking for a dime either. Like, you gotta be who you want to find. And so, absolutely, everybody deserves to have love. But if you're out here looking for love and you're looking for this person that's unattainable, knowing you're not up to par, then you don't need to be out there looking for a relationship. You need to be looking for somebody that's going to match your energy.
Yeah, but also if you a nickel and you on your way to becoming a dime, then you find somebody else that's on their way to becoming a dime too. Yeah. But you don't want to be stuck as a nickel and think you don't want to be stagnated. Yeah.
Don't let stagnate your growth. If you're trying to find somebody that's a nickel too, they might want to stay a nickel. And if you're trying to elevate, that's not going to work.
Yeah. Find somebody who you can grow with.
Mm-hmm.
Communication doesn't necessarily have to be in the top 3 most important things that I require from her, or it doesn't make the top 3.
So what are your top 3?
I'll give you one. Sex.
Okay.
That's probably gonna be in the top 3.
Honesty and dependability.
Okay.
Besides sex,
Amber just doesn't like the fact that I have all single friends.
No.
Like, she was Like, I don't have a leash on my neck, man. I'm not a dog, bro.
But as a man or head of the household, if you're doing what you're supposed to be doing and you've instilled that trust and confidence, your spouse, is, kind of by default will allow you to take that lead role, and it's not an issue.
While you practicing someone else's love language, you're actually conforming to their will, their willingness to be loved. So for you to do that, it's like you're practicing the actual act of submissiveness.
This may be unpopular, but these days I just don't feel like marriage is even worth it. Now, I'm not saying that I do not celebrate marriage for everybody else. I believe in black love. I believe in, love and happiness for everybody who wants it. But for me, marriage is a lot of work.
Like the authority of being a man. Like you really had to love a queen and you had to support a queen at the same time and not hinder a queen.